right, guys, welcome to the Good Stuff Podcast, where we try to help you love where you live by talking about the good stuff going on in the community, help you get a little more out of your house, or prepare you for your next real estate transaction. I'm Derek Schwyn, your host for Real Estate Professional with Keller Williams in the Marysville area. And I started thinking, how do I connect real estate and Thanksgiving, as this is coming out just before Thanksgiving? And I thought, hey, I've heard of this mortgage company called Tithe Lending. So I reached out to Mark, and here we are. So I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. We're excited to be here. So, Tithe Lending. So our premise is we honor God with our work, but we love our neighbor through generous giving. So this Thanksgiving podcast is right up our alley. The giving component is it's central to the mission. It's central to who we are.
Meant to be.
Yeah, 10% of every single loan transaction we do before we pay staff or before we pay for an expense goes straight into our foundation. So that's a practice of our business. And then that foundation goes and it fuels nonprofits all around the city who are doing great work for folks in need.
All kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. So in our area, there's just a lot of stuff going on. And I know you've got some experience in that and some impact there, which is pretty key. So we'll get to that.
Yeah.
There's Bruce Daniels with Performance Automotive has Impact 60. We have the Hope Center, which is obviously such a big thing in our community. If you've been around for a while, I'm sure you've heard of it. And the different things that go on in that. So Care Train is another big one we've got in our community. I don't know if you've heard of the Care Train. It's an auction. I think this is like 30 years, 35 years or so they've been on it at the Ace in town. And there's a lot of other businesses that partake in that. So it's a big charity one for the holidays. But the Hope Center, what I wanted to get my list for was there's the Christmas store for, have you heard of that one? That part of it, that's awesome. Emergency assistance, community kitchen, furniture bank, youth programs. There's so much that goes on there. And obviously it used to be housed in one area. Now it's dispersed. And we were just talking that they're working on consolidating that again. So hopefully that gets there at some point.
Yeah.
There's the secondhand store. So just trying to illustrate the picture that we've got a giving community in the Marysville area, and it's a culture, it's a thing that goes on there. And so it really impacts the lives of those there, especially with affordable housing and all of that. And so that's really
affordable. that word's becoming interesting in all communities around Columbus, isn't it?
What exactly does that mean?
I don't know anymore. I think it means if you can afford it, you can get one. But yeah, no, it's definitely become a challenge. And obviously, on the real estate side, you guys face it every day. On the lending side, so do we. And there's a lot of things that we're doing to combat that. But luckily, Marysville is still considered a fairly affordable area with everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm. And it's a really interesting thing. There's a lot of conversation about that going on. And sometimes there's folks talking about the affordability for the county versus the city. And, if you take 42 and north, the average sold price is like $330, I think last time I looked. And if you add that or add the southern portion in, it goes to like $470 or so. So a bit of a difference, obviously, when you get outside of it. And whatnot. So let's dive into your story. How did you get here?
Oh man, it's a long story. So I can I'll try to condense this for you and make it short and sweet. But yeah, so I've been in mortgage for 18 years, and it's something that we were talking before the show. It's not something that you ever dream about doing when you're a little kid. It's not on what you want to go to. You're at school. What do you want to grow up and be? And people dress up like firefighters and police. Yeah,
there wasn't a career day mortgage guy that came into your school.
No, like, hey, I want to hand out 30-year debts to people, all the time. No, but so I started doing this right out of college, and I found out how impactful it is. And it's not something that you even teach in business school. We don't really learn about the debt side of finance very much, but you learn that the majority of the people that you're around, that's where we are when it comes to finance. So financial advisors, they can help increase wealth. They can help plan for the future, but a lot more people are playing on the debt side and really structuring budgets and making sure that their day-to-day living expenses are set up correctly. And then the home is really unique because not only is it people's greatest asset, the equity in people's homes typically is the greatest asset that they have for 8 out of 10 homeowners, but it's also the biggest bill they pay, everything else. So I started figuring out, hey, this is a really impactful industry to be in. I fell in love with it, and so I've been in it ever since. So my story is one of the classic achievements, try to find success. That's what I wanted to have. And success in my mind was grow bigger teams, do more volume, have cool titles, make lots of money, become known for success, at least the perception of success in people's minds. And we attained that. So I was, up until this point about last year, I was the president at Lower.com. We had named stadium downtown, the new Crew Stadium, which was great. It was phenomenal. Really cool experience to be able to do that. We had gotten really good Series A seed money out of Excel from San Francisco. So I think it's still the largest Series A ever in Ohio history. We got $100 million. Yeah. We grew the team. The time at Lower was phenomenal, and it's still here. It's a great company. So I was attaining a lot of the things that I thought were success, but what I was finding was it wasn't really ultimately fulfilling for me. What was fulfilling about it is leading teams and developing leaders and investing in people and doing the right thing for customers. But my faith was growing exponentially at the time, my faith in Jesus. And I was really trying to find a way that how do I let my faith really permeate everything that I do on a weekly basis?
Manage both of those things.
Right. So I went through a whole series of potential options on what that would look like in my head. And finally, I was like, you know what? I can do this. I'm equipped to grow mortgage teams. I know how to do this business. I know how to scale companies. I know how to make money at it. I just need to tie my heart to Jesus in and through my business. So that's where the idea of Tithe was born. I was like, hey, there's this biblical principle that shows me how to manage my finances and the blessing that I'll live under if I do so. So just my co-founder, Brian, and I, he was at Lower with me. We left. We started Tithe Lending. Like I said, it's been about a year. And we've honored those principles. So 10% of everything that we do goes right into community impact. And it's the first 10%. And it's not if we have money left over. It's a practice of our business that every transaction, before any money flows anywhere else, we give that money away. And what we've seen is more fulfillment, more impact, and more actual meaning in our work. Our team, one thing that's cool about it is they've been able to tie a mortgage transaction literally helps feed a homeless person in need. A mortgage transaction helps rescue a kid or a woman out of sex trafficking that's happening here in Ohio. Or it could, it's tuition assistance for kids that can't afford education. When you can connect our mortgages directly to big community impact, that's where everything changes. Our mission doesn't become just doing a great job helping people become homeowners. Our mission is so much more, so much bigger. And it's so much more far-reaching into the community.
Well, I'm thinking it almost takes it from a corporate responsibility back to a personal responsibility and a heart and soul. Then we're doing this for business. And
well, yeah, businesses are made up of people, right? So it's like, hey, so this isn't just like an entity versus a human being. Like we can be both. We can be good citizens of our communities. And do the right thing. Yeah,
yeah. And the phrase that keeps coming to mind: "Put your money where your mouth is."
Yeah.
But you guys already put your money where your mouth is. But you guys also volunteer and
yeah. I mean, from the biblical standpoint, Jesus says like, "Hey, where your treasure is, your heart will be also." And we go about it say, "Hey, let's get our butts in there too." So yeah, we put our money there. But it's one thing for our team to be able to say, "Yeah, we make donations to these things on every mortgage," and people in the community love that. I mean, they feel good about growing their community, and Marysville is no exception to this. And realtors feel good that our transactions are going and fueling something significant, but there's something way, way different when you go get in front of those where the money is flowing and helping. That changes it. That's what connects you at a heart level. Then it's no longer about the money. When your butt's in those places and those facilities, and we've been in the Hope Center, we've seen what they do. They're doing fantastic work. That's where it really clicks.
That's for sure. It's the whole community. It revolves, or it's a full circle. So the first time I heard about you guys was this when Becky from the Hope Center came in and gave a presentation at the Real Estate Association and was just talking about updates and things going on with the Hope Center. So tell the folks out there.
I think I actually was supposed to be at that one. But I didn't know about it. It wasn't on my calendar. So Becky texted me. She's like, "Hey, I think I filled in nicely there for you." But,
what I heard was good.
Yeah. So she knows our pitch pretty well. I should just hire her.
Hey, it works out pretty good.
Yeah, but the Hope Center, I can tell you a little bit about how we got involved there. So when we had first started out, I didn't really consider Marysville as a different community in Central Ohio that was like a main differentiator, because what we like to do is keep the money from the donations of those transactions going into the communities where they come from. And we're licensed in Texas and Florida, some other states. So we like to make sure that like those local transactions, those local donations go into the places that are feeding back into that community. So I didn't really necessarily think Marysville was different than Greater Columbus. Well, we started hearing from all the agents in Marysville, like, no, we are. Like, this is different. But
and
also,
we like it that way.
Well, yeah. And but they all mentioned Hope Center. Like you got to go see what they're doing. Yeah. They're doing a lot with a little, and that was we found to be true. The first time I talked to Becky, I was like, man, I feel like I'm talking to a version of myself that's in a nonprofit seat. But Becky worked in corporate for decades at the highest levels. I mean, she was an executive, in business, so she's used to having to drive results and show results to whether it's shareholders or people that are invested into those things. Because if you don't get results in business, like, you're done.
Right.
You got to get them or you don't exist. So even though Hope Center had gone through, basically they had facility space that you've mentioned. Now they don't. Funding issues. There's been lots of different things that they're up against, but they keep finding ways to overcome those obstacles. And they're doing a lot with less resources than a lot of other places around town and around our country. So I started seeing that and I was like, wow, $1 to the Hope Center stretches. It goes far. And when I started realizing, okay, how many homeless people you feed up in Marysville? How many homeless people could really possibly live in Marysville? Like, in my head, I thought it'd be like 30 or 40.
Right.
No, it's over 250 a day.
Yep. They serve a lot of meals.
It's insane. Over 250 a day. I was like, wow, I got to witness this. So our team's been there. Like, we've done the meal prep. I've seen the amount of food that gets prepared and doled out every single day. I've gone and done the meal distributions. I've seen the folks that are living out of their cars and they're in desperate situations, and praying with those folks and just seeing what they're up against. And they're like, wow, where else would they go in this community if the Hope Center didn't exist? So it was an easy thing for us to get behind. So a lot of our transaction revenues, and specifically everything that comes from that Marysville, upper northwest quadrant of central Ohio, is going back into the Hope Center. We've been able to help out with a freezer. So one of the things they were up against is they didn't have a freezer for their meal deliveries. So they were utilizing volunteer home freezers, different restaurants that were chipping in and helping, but just the coordination effort to get that food on site.
Could have been more efficient for sure.
Oh yeah. And I think for any volunteer that was up against that, it would break you at some point. So we were able to come alongside them and buy a fairly expensive, large walk-in freezer that they can actually utilize that now for meals.
So for those of you that don't know specifically, they were at the old East Elementary School on 6th Street, I think it is. And then the school took that building back and put that back into the school system as the administrative building.
Yep.
And so now the Hope Center, they have a home. They just don't have a consolidated home, which is a big purpose when they started the Hope Center, to put all those resources in one place. And so things like a freezer that doesn't make them go even farther out is such a huge thing for the Hope Center. And like you said, not breaking volunteers and consolidating efforts and making things more efficient.
Yeah, so we were happy to do that, and we're happy to continue to invest in the Marysville community and specifically the Hope Center to try to make sure we can reach more people.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and the other thing, if you haven't heard, there's the Impact Station from Impact 60 part of the same building as the Y, and that's now given a spot for some homeless folks to take advantage of. I've yet to tour it, so it's on my list to get out there. But definitely wrapping around the people in our community is a big thing. And especially, I was having a conversation with a client the other day about how many times you're hearing now, I can't afford $1,900 a month in rent. So it's creating this big divide and challenge. And a lot of people I went to school with and grew up with, man, those prices are just ridiculous. And it's unfortunately it's having the effect of forcing people out of their homes, or it is going to lead that way more and more and be more of a challenge. So, leaning into our community and being a part of our communities, and that's really the quality of life. And as we grow in Marysville, that's going to create even more challenges and situations. But if we don't stay together as a community, if any community doesn't, I recently heard at a presentation that the Gallup poll, I guess, has a wellness index. Have you heard of this?
No.
And then the 5, and I don't know if they studied it, and so that now they've come out with kind of their results. But this guy that was giving a presentation the other day basically said in his presentation, it was about growth and talking about Intel and the growth out there and how they're trying to help them manage that.
Yeah.
The complexity of that. And time and time again in his presentation, he said, can we create great spaces? And he referenced something getting torn down that was built 20 years ago. And he said, nobody really is protesting that we're tearing it down because it's nothing special.
Yeah.
So what things are we creating these days that's nice and new and we care about? And he said that the 5th thing on that wellness index was like pride in your community, your home, where you're at. And if we don't care about one another, if nobody's caring about you, your wellness and your community and whatnot is a challenge. To kind of wrap it back into what's all this mean for where we live and what we can do to be a part of it.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that, and that's what's so important about home ownership is because just the word ownership, it just by itself means like, hey, like, usually there's some sort of like a pride attached to like, I'm responsible for this. Like, what does ownership really mean? Like, I'm responsible, I'm accountable. This is something I'm pouring some of my time into and some of my soul into. So I take responsibility for
kind of stewardship.
What's it look like? Like, is it something that this is where I want to live. This is like where I want to grow my family. This is my community. So yeah, I think that all this ties into itself in community, what you're doing.
If you guys like your community or you care about your community, you want to learn more about your community, get connected to other resources, I encourage you to subscribe to this channel or subscribe to my newsletter that I put out weekly. Or if there's anything else I can do, let me know. Until then, we'll continue. So so you guys are involved in other communities. What are some other stories or impacts, some soul moments that God moments you guys have had that, just kind of keep the fire going? And
well, I mean, I can tell you there's more going on than I think what I even realized, but which means that there's even more need. The fact that there's more going on means that there's need everywhere. It's just pouring out. So we've gotten involved with the Dream Center, the Columbus Dream Center. There's one in Hilliard. There's one downtown.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, the downtown one. It's geared towards homeless, but they also have some great programs for after school, for kids in the communities. There's lots of kids that throughout COVID, there were these things like after school learning centers that popped up. But they really weren't after school because school wasn't happening. But a lot of kids in our city are eating breakfast and lunch at school. And then when they return home, there's no dinner. Well, when school was out of session, there was just no food. And a lot of them don't have adults that are, part of their daily life. So, I mean, they're just kind of like scrambling. There's nobody that's like actually harnessing this and saying like, hey, we care about you. We love you. We're going to invest in you. You're valued, and let's go, try to do those things. So the Dream Center stepped up in a big way. There was about 100 different learning extension centers is what they were called during COVID that had popped up around the city. And they were hosted in churches and, different buildings and things like that. But it was a place that kids could go to get fed and get tutored and get the gospel. It was just a great thing that was going on. So now there's even more that are needed in these after school centers, but a lot of the funding has gone away. So we had stepped up and tried to help out with those from a funding perspective, but also volunteering. We do a lot of the homeless meal service through those. And then there's communities on the west side of Columbus. I mean, and really pretty much anywhere you go, you're going to find the need. So there's things that we're doing through Thanksgiving to deliver, meals to families that otherwise wouldn't be able to have them. We've partnered with Grace Haven through Youth for Christ. So the work that they're doing is phenomenal. I mean, they're rescuing youth out of sex trafficking. It's 1,000 to 3,000 youth a year that are being rescued.
It's always amazing every time I hear that,
crazy.
Like Marysville, Central Ohio in Ohio is such a big problem.
It's absolutely insane. But specifically for the youth, there's so much compliance and regulation when you're dealing with youth. So it's not an easy thing to tackle. So there's more funding needed. There's more staffing needed.
Oh, I didn't think of that aspect.
A lot of hoops to jump through. Once you cross over 18 and you're rescued out of human trafficking, there's a lot less regulation to help those kind of folks. Which just kind of seems backwards that they make it hard to help people that are actually the most in need in that area. But so we've been able to jump in and help through funding and volunteering in a lot of different spaces. And our team loves it. Like I said, it connects us to our mission, and it's a reason for us to go grind in an industry right now that's not exactly easy. Mortgage industry is a tough industry right now due to rates and home inventory. It's pretty much every headwind that you can imagine. We're facing it. But our team specifically, we go and we attack every single week. We stay on offense. We stay optimistic. And it's not just because we want to go get paid and get more loans. It's because we know who these loans are serving. That's the difference. When you get a big mission and you can tap into a big mission as a company, your team has a reason to go stay focused and grind, even when things are tough. That's what we've unlocked, because when things get tough, natural instinct, our human brain is like, hey, is there a different path? Is there a workaround to get to the same destination with less?
When things get tough, the tough get going and the rest don't.
Yeah, the rest look for a different option, pretty much. Yeah. So, but our team doesn't have to do that because we know what our mission is. We didn't start a mortgage company; we started a mission. Yeah. So it's we've tapped into that, especially because we can see who these are helping in the community, regardless of what the environment and the mortgage, what the market looks like, is irrelevant to us.
So that's a good segue.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts? So this is tying real estate and Thanksgiving and community together.
Yeah.
I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the market and give our crystal ball maybe useful projections.
Do you have one? Is there like one that's just going to pop up from the center of the table?
It's going to, it actually just turns into a TV and there's a presentation here.
Okay. That's good.
I don't know. No, I think my gut, Well, one of the big things I've said is, and I was graduating college when '08 hit. And so I didn't really experience it like most people did and didn't really understand it until I watched the movie The Big Short and kind of read some other things and documentaries and whatnot. And to me, the central theme of that was, greed takes over and things run and nobody pays attention and everybody was saying things are great.
Yeah.
Or there was, the wolf in sheep's clothing, the veil was over things. So I've heard a lot of industry people say they fixed those problems. Things are great. But the central theme I'm talking about was people weren't paying attention to the problems.
Yeah.
So anybody that's saying things are great now, and I tell clients and, residents and whatnot, there's no numbers that show things are going to go south.
Not any one number, maybe directly. Yeah.
I mean, I think overall feeling and like the cycle's been up, so it's supposed to go down, that kind of stuff for sure. But the demands, everybody says there's enough demand for pricing not to go. There's enough equity because what is it like? 40% of homeowners don't have a mortgage. 60% are under 4%.
Yeah, I think the average like home equity across the country, if you just take the actual average, is like 190,000.
Yeah, last I heard
average equity.
Okay,
something crazy.
I haven't heard it for about a year, and last I heard it was 176. So I was looking forward to getting an update on that number.
There you go.
But that means we shouldn't see a bunch of foreclosures. But anyway, so all my point is, the numbers and everything seem to be good.
Yep.
But what's that other shoe that's going to drop that nobody's looking at?
It's really interesting right now because there doesn't seem to be like what's coming up is like some sort of like a massive home price crash. And depending on what you're looking at or who you're listening to that wants to, conjure up likes and clicks. I mean, you can make it seem dire. But what is happening is, debt is at an all-time high. I mean, really across, companies, government, individual households, all-time high credit card debt, which can only last for so long because balances and limits. I mean, once you start bumping up against those limits just always get extended into infinity. But we're also at all-time highs for credit card interest rates.
I was going to say the interest rates compared to home rates.
Correct. And you're looking at auto rates that have jumped like crazy. So consumer spending has stayed strong, but inflation has also been raging. So a lot of people have just been relying on credit to maintain their purchasing power. That does end at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start looking at defaults that could potentially start coming up, things are going to start slowing down. What that does to housing is yet to be determined. I think it's going to be really market by market. So like when you're looking at like Central Ohio market, I don't think you're going to see, massive supply all of a sudden hit the market and price go down. Very unlikely. I think there's other markets around the country that, that could happen, depending on like how accelerated or decelerated of a rate yet to be determined. But the debt is really starting to become an issue. And you're going to see that rear its ugly head. And that could start to maybe,
cascade.
It could work its way into demand. I don't know if it's going to work its way into increasing supply. But it could work its way into demand because if rates stay elevated like this, people are struggling to pay bills, and it's just going to.
There's so much you can do.
Yeah, it might put more people on the sidelines. But if they become a renter and as a long-term renter, that's not a great situation either because rent inflation's real, and every single year when you renew your lease, that payment's going up. At least if you lock into a 30-year fixed mortgage, you know that you have that payment stability in your budget. So yeah, I think the debt's going to be. I don't know which shoe drops or how it's going to fall, but
if there, not to say there is one,
right?
If there is one, what's it going to be? Yeah,
but the debt's becoming a problem. I mean, you can see.
And that was a large part. I didn't hear that at first, but that was a large part of '08 too, right? Was that the cash in hand versus the debt?
Yeah, what people are telling you is like, hey, it's not the same. There's been better restrictions and more visibility around who's getting access to debt. So I mean, it's not as much of a free for all as it was back then. So technically the debt's been underwritten better, but there's still a lot of it. And the cost of debt with these interest rates has gone up. So just because you underwrote it at a specific point and handed it out doesn't mean that those circumstances don't change. And then all of a sudden the access to that debt as circumstances change, that's where this is all going to play out in a different direction. And who knows where it goes or how fast, but you can put me down on it. I think that the debt is a major problem. So
this coming from the debt guy.
Yeah.
So supply and demand affects pricing, balanced markets, about 6 months worth of inventory. So last time I think it did the numbers last week, and we had 47 houses sell in the Marysville School District in the last 30 days. Times 6, that was 288 or 282. So we'd need 240 more houses to get to a balanced market to really start affecting prices. I don't see there's like very, 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 very small. So, as far as people, the few people that I talk to that still are holding on to hope that the market's going to crash, not going to happen.
It's probably not going to happen. No. And I think that the good news is there's lenders out there that have different programs that are adjusted for this market. We know that this environment exists. So like we have a 1% down program that helps out a lot of home buyers. I mean, a lot of times these elevated things that, okay, down payment's an issue. They might be able to afford the actual monthly payment. Their budget, would call for it, but maybe they don't have the down payment on these elevated home prices. There's ways that we can adjust for that. There's things that we can do to help out with that. So I would say not all lenders created equal in those program offerings. So if you are struggling and you're like, hey, I want to break into home ownership, I'm okay with the monthly budget, I just need help figuring out how I can actually obtain the house, that's where shop around and see if those programs exist for you.
For sure. And that's a good point. That's one of the things I try to be the biggest proponent of especially because we like to feed our families. So we like, to help people and make some money. But we are here to help provide an education, consult, and say, hey, here's options. Here's what you can do. And so I always try to encourage people, don't be scared. We don't bite.
Yep.
Go talk to somebody. And like you said, nobody's created equal. There's all kinds of different options and different, whatever it is, look around. You can find somebody.
Exactly.
That's for sure. Hey,
yeah. One cool thing that we've got going right now is we've been able to partner with Ohio Credit Union, and there's not many lenders that have access to those things. And so specifically, like we have some ARM products that we can place through Ohio. Ohio is obviously well respected and very trusted here in Central Ohio.
Been around for a minute.
Yeah, they have. So we have access to some very, very low cost, low rate hybrid ARM options that folks can access. And then we do free refinancing for our customers. So when rates go down in the future and you want to cash in on those savings, we don't charge you any tithe lending fees up front in order to do that. So it's just title and recording at that point. So we have access to Ohio product. We have access to low rate and fee structure, and then we'll refinance you for free and lock you in when rates go down. So that's that's been the hot ticket for us lately.
Mm-hmm. What's the saying? The marry the house, date the rate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you've heard that a couple of times over the last year.
And as the non-lender in the room, I like to add on, if you can refinance, it's not a guarantee, so don't get sold if you don't think you're going to be there. But
yeah,
in general,
wouldn't it be divorce the rate though? Because how many people do you know are married and dating something at the same time?
I like it.
When you marry the house and then you divorce the, I don't know.
Divorce the rate, yeah. Marry the house.
Marry the rate for now, divorce it later. Somehow you keep the house in the divorce. I don't know how that works. But
go to the lawyer. I won't go down that path.
Yeah.
I did see a clip whenever rates were at, I think it was 15, but there was a clip of a news program of an agent talking about, people are just used to rates. They don't ever think it's going to get back down to 13%, so it's, because the average 40-year or 50-year rate is what, like 7.47 or something.
At the time, what was the average home price though? It was like probably like
50.
Yeah. $50,000.
Yeah. So
a little different.
Yeah. But just the perspective of everybody's so caught up on, they're not caught up, but everybody's so used to 3% rates and thinking 8% is crazy, which comparatively are correct.
Yeah.
But
you got to also weigh out, if someone's on the sideline waiting to buy right now, there's more to home ownership than just the rate and the payment on the house. This is where you're raising your family. So, if you find a space that you're like, all right, this is where my memories are going to be made. This is where my kids are going to grow up. This is the neighborhood I want to be in. These are my neighbors. Like, these are the memories you're going to have. Like when you're on your deathbed someday and you think about like your life, a lot of what happens at your life is at your home. So you're not going to be like, hey, remember when we waited and we got that 1% lower on our rate? You're not going to think about that. You're going to think like, hey, remember when our kid took our first steps in that living room? Or hey, remember we took like the prom picture out, by the tree? Like you're going to remember the things that happen at the house. There's way more to it.
Well, again, it's one thing to donate money. It's another thing to get involved and engage with people. And it's those memories and it's those experiences. And
correct. Our team is never going to remember, hey, remember that 1 month we spent $25,000 or whatever it was on that item for that nonprofit. Remember that money? No, we're not going to remember that. Like, hey, remember that team serve that we did where there was that super impactful moment with that group of people, or there was that really cool thing that happened, or there was that guy that like we literally prayed with and like things changed. We're going to remember the people. We're not going to remember the dollars. So it's the same thing with home ownership and buying a house.
Yeah, and to take it to a practical standpoint, it's always amazing the difference between people that will rent. They don't get any of that money back.
Yeah.
But when I sit down with somebody to list their house and they say, well, I don't want to lose money. Been here for 5, 10, 20. If you've been there for very long, you're not going to lose money.
Yeah.
But worst case scenario, let's say you break even, you had a free place to live.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just the utility and payment you get.
This is the other funny thing that people don't realize a lot of times is that being a homeowner is actually more flexible than being a renter these days. You sign a 12-month lease. you're in it, or you got to break it, right? You buy a house with where supply and demand is right now. You don't like it in 4 or 5 months. You can list it. You'll sell it probably within
It'll
2
go.
weeks. I mean, you can get out of your house in a couple of weeks. It's so
and
pleasant.
you're in such a good position too. Yeah, it's well, and I think how hard is it to anybody watching that's trying to get into rental? It knows how hard it is, and getting another rental.
Correct. Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people that have done that. Where buy a primary residence, they live there for a year, 2 years. They move, and instead of selling their place, they rent it out. I mean, it's a way that they can accumulate rental properties as well.
Yeah, for sure. Let me check my notes here. Okay, so I'm going to move on to answer some questions.
Right.
I Googled what are the most common questions here, kind of from the community. Get your thoughts on this one.
Santa Claus real? Is that
Of course.
Oh, yeah.
Should I give, what's your thought? Well, obviously I know how you guys structure things, maybe personally, but I'm going to guess it's the same.
Yeah.
Should we give 10% before or after taxes?
Well, dude, so here's my take on tithing, and where it comes from this is if you count everything and you pay everything else first, and then you give God what's left over, this is my personal take. That doesn't require much faith. So it's like, hey, I give 10%, but like what 10%? The reason I've always done 10% off top line, off gross, is because before anybody gets paid, including taxes, Uncle Sam, whatever, I want to make sure that I'm trusting that with God, because tithing is supposed to be first fruits. Like if you read the Bible, it's supposed to be like God gets whatever is first, and it's over and over again in the Bible. And then the remainder is what I use. If I pay God later, if I pay a bunch of other stuff in front of him, and then I give God something that's left over, if I got 10% left over, it requires no faith. And I don't think we usually get rewarded for lack of faith. God rewards faith and trust and hope in him. So what we do is before anything else goes out, before I look and count everything else to see if I've got enough left over, God gets what's first, and then I use what I keep.
I like it.
So that's how I take it.
Yep. Yeah, and I was hoping you'd get to it's not necessarily about the number, about where it is. It's about the faith.
Yeah.
It's about the being thankful for what you're given and honoring.
What people can't, I feel like a lot of people miss, the Bible is so connected. This isn't just like an Old Testament thing. If you just think about God and Jesus and what he did. So if you're a Christian and you believe that Jesus died and we're saved through him, it says in the Bible that he died for us while we were still sinners. Mm-hmm. Jesus tithed. He basically said like, hey, I'm going to go and I'm going to do this first before you come to me. So while we were spitting on him and crucifying him, he died for us. He didn't say like, hey, I'm going to wait and see if they come around. And if they do, then I'll die for them.
Yep.
And that's kind of like tithing. Like if you pay all your bills first and then you give God what's left over, like you give first and you have faith for what's going to come next. So that's just the way I connect it in my head.
Yeah, no, I don't have anything to say to dispute that. I totally agree. What was the other one? Oh, the other one, I think that it's a discussion point for a lot of people. Does it go to the church or does it go elsewhere?
Yeah, so personally, I think it goes to the church. Like when I talk about the storehouse in the Old Testament, the storehouse was, the temple, it was the church. So where I give my personal is to the church. And because when we get, to heaven someday, we're saved through Christ, but then there is, an account that we give. Mm-hmm. And the last time I checked, Tithe Lending is not going to have to give an account. Like a business is not going to have to give an account.
Yeah.
But we are as people. So where I tithe my personal income, it goes to my church. Now, why we as a business, where we tithe, is we say, hey, we're going to go above and beyond. We want to incorporate this as a practice of our business. And we send it to the nonprofits who are out there meeting needs. We feel good about that because the business entity itself isn't required to do it. But by tithing, I just told you that we do it first, is we're saying we put God first in our business. So if God's first in our business, we hope that our business will be blessed because of that. Not just necessarily in financial returns, but just like living under the peace and the presence of that. Yeah, exactly. So I tithe my personal to the church, and then our business, we give that 10%. We just honor that principle around town through nonprofit.
Very good. Yep. Again, I would not disagree. So the last question I have, a nice generic one. I Googled and this was the first FAQ on Dave Ramsey's website. I thought, yeah, it's a good generic one. Maybe help somebody out there. Cause I think it is such a fundamental thing, especially if you're getting into this and, you buy a house every 10 years on average. So it's hard to stay up on these things. How do you qualify for a mortgage? What's the 30-second
have some income, have some. No, it's essentially it's the main buckets of credit. So that's are you paying your bills on time? Is that something that where you're managing your financing as well? So like if you're not, and you've got a bunch of late payments and you've got different liens and judgments and things like that, you're probably going to have some trouble. But just make sure your credit history is clean. Income, is it stable? They're going to check stability. So depending on how you make your money, there's different methods and ways for that. So that's why we say you could consult with us, especially if you're W-2'd and you've been at your job forever and it's a straight salary.
Should be pretty easy peasy.
That's the easiest one. Yeah, set hourly and it's consistent. That's an easy one. But if you're self-employed, you got a bunch of different streams of income and tons of deductions. That's going to be a little more complex. So just make sure you're consulting a mortgage advisor early on in the process. Down payment, just depending on the kind of house that you're buying, and then the structure of what that deal looks like. Sometimes you have very, very low down payment options. If you're a veteran, you might be able to put down nothing. There's lots of different structures, and different companies have different ways that they can entice certain aspects of the community. Like, hey, maybe like this is a segment of business that we like for our portfolio, so we'll create something special for that. So not every lender is created equal, but I'd say 80% of the time it's something right down the middle. So standard programs apply. So consult your mortgage advisor. You can do stuff with as little as 1% to 3% down for almost all programs, but you might even be able to get better than that depending on that. So beautiful. I would just say just make sure that you've consulted, because there's so many people that think they need 20% down still. It's so amazing how we don't do a lot of that.
That is, and how little it happens.
It doesn't. You don't need that, and it doesn't actually make the process any more streamlined. I mean, if you're putting 5% down or even the 1% down, we're still getting those cranked out from start to finish in less than 10 days. So, I mean, the speed of that, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't. So, unless you're up against a cash offer, I mean, a conventional 1% down offer on a house, or a conventional 20% offer to the seller, I mean, that's almost irrelevant. It's just
when people say cash is king, I'm like, what do I care if you bring me $100 or $100 bills or a check?
Yeah,
check's easier to carry.
Exactly.
I don't care who it's coming from. So,
but those are the main buckets.
Cool, good deal. Well, we're at 40 minutes. I think it's about a good conversation. Good. Unless you got any other good tidbits to share, any other thoughts to?
No, man. The only thing I would share is just our company. So we are very, very blessed right now to be able to do what we're doing. We started this company in 2023, and one of the cool things about that was we got to set up all of our cost structures and the way that our company operates to match the current environment, which means we get to donate 10% of the revenue to local nonprofits, but we also get to offer great pricing and fee structures to our customers. So we'd love to have business from anybody in the Marysville. Obviously, we're a for-profit business company, but we would love to assist anybody with their needs and then return that money back into the community to help somebody else in need as well.
Beautiful. Well, thanks so much for having the conversation with me. Thanks for talking community and volunteering and giving and really that community aspect of being a good steward of what you're given.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a message that we don't hear enough. We could always use more of it. So I tip my hat to you in your efforts to be bold with the name of your company and put it out there and come talk to us and
it's great.
Serve as you're serving. So anyway, thanks guys for watching and listening, however you're consuming this. I'd love to have you on the other side of the table from me if you want to come in and chat about whatever good stuff you've got going on, if you take care of houses, real estate professional, whatever it might be. So like this video if you did, subscribe if you haven't. And until next time, take care.